Wali and Beth Lingard, and Ashely's been an Agile project lead with ModCloth.com. They actually work for, both of them work together at ModCloth.com. And ModCloth.com is an indie retro clothing online retailer that's serving about 1.5 million visitors per month. Ashely oversees numerous cross-functional teams and their adoption and use of Agile methodologies with software and non-software teams. In addition, she was featured in the Agile Alliance's Diversity in Agile campaign focusing on gender diversity. Beth has 6 years of experience in the internet and e-commerce sector, and for those involve a variety of Agile methodologies. She also works as an Agile project lead at ModCloth.com, where she coaches product and technology teams utilizing Agile frameworks including XP, Scrum, and Kanban. In addition, Beth was a key lead in implementing Agile principles and Scrum at firstgiving.com. Please welcome both Ashely and Beth.
The change, where we are now, some of the challenges of where we go from here, some lessons learned, and just recommendations. So when would we recommend using what we do, when would we not recommend that kind of thing? We are ModCloth.com. We are a vintage-inspired women's fashion company. We are entirely online. We are currently the Inc. 2, the second fastest growing company in the country according to their analysis. We were founded in 2002. We really took off in 2007. We have tripled our team in 2010, which meant almost entirely building out our technology team. So we have about 20 engineers right now, which includes both contractors and staff employees. We have a team, our integrated team includes product managers, Agile project leads, which is the role that Beth and myself play. We have engineers, interaction designers, user researchers, business data analysts, quality assurance engineers, and ops engineers that tend to work on the same Scrum team. So that's a lot of people, which gives us some unique challenges. Where we were, velocity tracking, sort of engine, how we were keeping track of how much we could get done. We were really overloaded in terms of not really being sure how much we could get done at one time. We had almost no project planning whatsoever. So we really didn't know what we were going to be able to get done in a sprint, in a month, in a quarter, or in a year. We had a brand new team who really just didn't know what our velocity was going to be. So that was a big problem, big challenge for us, which meant that our teams were getting pretty overloaded. Our exec team would make promises to our board that we had no capability of delivering on. It really got us into some tough situations. So that was one place of where we were, and luckily we moved a little bit beyond that. For design and development, we were really almost neck and neck. When we started going through, or when we were looking at implementing Kanban, we really did not have any phase for understanding the requirements of what it was we were going to build. So a lot of times we would get ideas from our executive team or from our product managers, and we would just be told, okay, design, start working, development's going to be right behind you, basically. This was especially an issue for us before holiday. So being a retailer, we have to get everything done a couple of weeks before Thanksgiving hits. So September, October is really our crunch time. And around that time last year was when we were looking at, well, how can we make this better? Because we had this list of kind of sexy features that we wanted to try and get out the door that we thought were going to drive holiday traffic and holiday revenue. The issue was that we didn't even have time to figure out if those things were worth building. And so we kind of just got the directive, okay, this is what you're going to build. And a lot of people, we have a lot of really smart people on our team, and nobody was comfortable with ours. 2010, we actually started building out our own internal team. So until we started building out the internal team, we really weren't practicing any actual forms of Agile. the contracting company down in Mexico had been doing daily stand-ups. They really weren't doing any kind of iteration planning. They weren't tracking velocities. There was nothing predictive coming out of this, which again is one reason why it was sort of, we don't know what we're going to do. So by the time we got to about holiday of last year, so again, this is October, November time frame. Not ready to be on fire. Not ready yet. When we were around holiday time of last year, we had implemented Scrum, and we really did have pretty good buy-in from the engineers and from our management and executive staff about using some real Agile practices. So we were pretty established with Scrum. We were starting to use XP, so we had trained a few engineers in test-driven development. We were setting up continuous integration servers. We were starting to move in that way. We were teaching people how to pair. Not really entirely adopted. It was very much an experiment at that point. We were not using Scrum at that point. So now we can be on fire.
Actually, before you catch on fire, it sounds like you did two kind of big things. That you started hiring locally, and you also moved to your initial crack at Agile. Were those related, or what was is there any story there, or is it just that's how it worked out?
It was, we were building out the team a little bit before we started to use real Agile, I'll call it, or started to actually implement it. The intention had always been to be an Agile company. We are part of the experience organization. So our chief officer is called the experience officer, not technology, because it includes product design, operations, engineering. It includes a little bit more than a traditional technology organization might. And our CXO, is his title, he is very much on board with being Agile and had always wanted us to move that way. But the team in Mexico, I don't think since there was such a great distance, it was hard to keep track of what they were really doing. It was more just about, honestly, keeping up with our growth. Like, keeping the site up was a bigger issue than are we implementing Agile effectively. So once we got people in-house and he was able to get a little bit more hands-on and build out a team that understood it and got people who were interested in applying it, that's when it really kind of took hold. So it was the right transition time, I guess.
Thanks.
So now we can be on fire. Stakeholder management was and continues to be an issue for us. We are a fashion company. Well, actually, our company is kind of in an existential crisis right now. Half the business thinks that we're a fashion company, and half the business thinks that we're a technology company. And those two sides of the business conflict on a daily basis, to be honest with you. So stakeholder management was a huge issue for us because they had been used to a team that they had almost no contact with. Their requests basically went unheard. There's one product manager for the entire organization, and at that time it was probably 50 people or so. We're now close to 300. So again, we almost tripled our team in 2010. So we've built out our team in such a way that we're now more able to deal with those stakeholders and provide updates and really go back with the analysis of, okay, bring us your problems, we'll develop a solution together, we'll test whether or not that makes sense, and then we'll build whatever makes sense. That process is one way that we try to deal with the stakeholder management, but again, it has been a huge ongoing issue where they felt like they didn't know what was going on. They felt like engineering was getting this bias in the company as we were building things out. And one thing we've been trying to kind of educate them on is that what attracts a great merchandising person, what attracts a great buyer or writer to our company is not at all the same thing that attracts a great technologist to our company. So we have to develop different cultures within our individual organizations in order to get the best people in those fields. And I think once they saw us sort of building out the technology org and changing things from a ping pong table, it was a big deal because the merchandising people and the marketing people, they didn't have a ping pong table on their floor. They're welcome to use ours, but created this sense of a little bit of like an us and them kind of thing. So we're fighting against that and really trying to help people understand that we have to do what's going to bring us world-class people, and we have to be on the same level as what the people are that we're competing against to get resources and best talent we can find. So what prompted a change? We're getting a little bit of this as we go along, but unsustainable workload and expectations. Again, that goes back to our executives not knowing what was reasonable, so they were making unrealistic claims about what could get done, which affected ultimately, it was a desire to identify the root problem and propose the best possible solution for that problem. We've done a lot of cool things on our site. It is an entirely homegrown e-commerce system on Rails, and it's pretty impressive what we do and what we've built it for. But some of the innovation that we've done, we haven't actually taken the time to step back and prove, is this a profitable feature for us? Does this drive revenue, or do we lose money on each product that we launch through the system? We needed to incorporate non-engineers in a meaningful way. Because we have so many diverse stakeholders, we have a lot of different people that we've tried to incorporate into our teams to make sure that we're building the best solutions for our stakeholders and so that they feel included in the process. And our traditional Scrum process was not fulfilling all the needs that we had. We also had a desire to set expectations with the rest of the business. Again, this just goes back to the stakeholder management, helping them understand when we would be able to address some of their issues. A lot of them, more than anything, were bugs. They didn't necessarily want new features. They just wanted to know when this particular thing was going to be fixed. So setting expectations. This is where we are now. This is what we did during the holiday season, which is our busy time for everybody that buys the clothes and manages or helps work with our customers. For the technology team, it's actually kind of our breathing time because we put a code freeze into effect where we don't update the site except for hot fixes, basically, between Black Friday and about January 10th. So because we do, I think, 60% of our revenue in December, we just don't want to touch it. So what we did during that time is we stepped back and we reflected a little bit, and we came up with this lovely graphic, which is our new process, and it really takes us into Kanban. So we start with our backlog. Hang on. So we start with our backlog, and that's really where we fill in. These are all the things we're going to be thinking about. In Pivotal Tracker, this would be the ice box. These are the things that really, they're not scoped at all. We don't even know if we're going to work on them at any point. It's the holding place. This is where our stakeholders start to get involved too, so they help build this backlog.
Do you use Pivotal Tracker?
We do. We use it for our engineers. We tried to use it for the other members of those teams that you saw, and it failed pretty miserably. So we use the tracker for the engineers. Next, we move into opportunity assessment. So that is the phase where our product managers are working with the stakeholders to identify what is the actual problem that we're trying to solve, or what objective are we trying to meet for building a new feature. What do we want? What does success look like for this particular thing? We're looking entirely at problems and opportunities at this point. We're really trying to train the company to move away from coming to us with a solution, but rather coming to us with a problem or an opportunity or a goal we're trying to meet. We're really trying to get people to say, okay, what is the opportunity? How does this fit back into the strategic goals of the company for this year? How does that map back to our vision? That's become a real challenge to get people to think in that way, because everybody wants a fun job of discovery, which is thinking of the solutions, right? So coming up with different versions, testing mocks first, testing prototypes later after we iterate on things. Discovery is our biggest phase, and it's also the most fun phase for everybody. So this is really where the user researchers and designers get involved.
You have the first three backwards. Discovery and opportunity, how much before the backward?
It comes down to how we define this.
Yeah, I guess so.
Or how they're defining backlog.
Yeah, it just seems backwards.
Yeah, I think you're right. So the way that we define backlog is basically just a holding bin for anything we might consider working on. So it is not a defined list of anything that's ready to be worked on by any means. It's literally just we want to increase conversion from this percent to this percent at some point this year, and we're looking at that. We split our teams across different parts of the business. So we have a buying, we call them spheres. So we have a buying sphere that looks at everything from the time someone puts an item in their shopping bag to the time they check out, receive the item, and if they return the item. So that whole process lives in one sphere. We have a sourcing sphere that deals with from the time that we find an item at a trade show or at a designer's warehouse that we want to buy to the time that it gets on the site, and all of the processes that go through that. So each of these different spheres is taking a goal and saying, okay, we're going to identify how we in our sphere can affect or achieve that goal.
So who adds to the backlog? Because, mine is a little bit of a follow-up to this, because I feel that the person adding to the backlog would probably think of what the opportunity is, what the advantage is before it goes in the backlog. Or is this, you open it up and you're looking for random ideas, and then you say, okay, this seems like a good idea, I think your opportunity assessment phase, and you go from there.
So one of the reasons why they overlap is because they do overlap, right? There's almost no way for us to keep people from thinking about both the problem and potential solutions. So the person who owns the backlog is our product managers, who in Scrum would be the product owner. Our product managers are extremely involved in our process. They sit with the development team. They work with the stakeholders that they, so again, the sourcing stakeholders are different from the buying stakeholders, different from the communication stakeholders. So they work with those different stakeholders to build a backlog, things that we want to look at for those different people that we're working with, anything that comes out of user testing or analysis on live features that we just launched, things that we might want to go back and iterate on, or their own ideas and things that they want to, innovation that they want to try. So those are kind of the three places that the backlog gets built from, but the product manager does own it and have the final say of what gets in and what gets iced for a while.
At what point do the development teams get in the picture? Is it the discovery phase?
Yes, they are involved. They usually know what's going on in the opportunity assessment phase because, again, the product managers are very involved. So our product managers come to our daily stand-ups, they come to the planners, they come to the retrospectives. They're extremely integrated into our team. So the engineers usually know what's going on, but they don't really turn on until they get into discovery. So at that point, the designers are coming to them and saying, is this feasible? What does this look like? And a lot of times, so many times the product manager, the engineer, and the designer will sit down and they'll look at a paper mock or they'll look at a Photoshop file and we'll talk about, okay, how difficult might that be? And then the product manager will say, okay, that can wait until a later version. So designer, let's take that out for now. Or the designer can fight for it and say, you know what, I really feel like for the whole flow of this is something our users are going to need right now. I think we should do it. And the product manager obviously gets that final say of what goes in and what goes out. But the engineers ramp up the discovery.
You said that it's only the engineers who have used the tracking tool. What do the non-engineers use to track their progress and where their item is in the queue?
So some of our teams do, and I think Beth's teams do this more than mine, do actually use Tracker for their design tasks and research tasks and things, but they don't assign points to them. So it's a way to keep the velocity accurate for the engineers, but also track in one place. My teams really didn't like that, so we decided to use a board like that, and it's very similar to what Sam's team did, where we have, it's much more of a Kanban board. So we lay out the backlog, the in progress, the done. We use our colored stickies depending on the person because it's for each team they have a different role. So we have one color for the designer, one for the researcher, one for the analyst. Those are usually the three that we have. So
can you describe the organization breakdown a little more? Is your team a multidisciplinary team? Is a bunch of those? Is that how it works?
yeah, so those 8 roles that I put up, the product manager, APL, engineer, ops, QA, business data analyst, interaction design, and user researcher, they are the core members of a sphere. So we have 6 spheres on the books, but we combine them at times depending on resource constraints and priorities in the business. So not all of those teams have all of those roles at one time. Not all of those spheres have anybody allocated to them based on priorities. The reason we did that was because when we moved into this kind of phase and we really wanted to focus on what the opportunities are and what the best solutions are, we needed to integrate our analysts a lot more into that to understand the success of previous features, understand what might we be able to accomplish if we did X, Y, or Z. So that was one reason why we wanted to start allocating our analysts more heavily into things. Also, they are helping to inform the data architecture and the structure of the tables and systems and things like that. Our user researchers are very heavy in opportunity assessment and discovery, really not at all involved in implementation, and then retrospective is sometimes also called rapid response. So they're involved after it gets live, looking at the success of it, tracking how people are using it, does it match what we thought they would do, that kind of thing. Of course, our interaction designers work primarily in discovery. They're also in implementation. We do something something similar to what David, I think, was mentioning about involving like the QA team and the engineer, or earlier on, we do that with our design as well. So our QA is involved primarily from discovery onward to help us figure out what the feature is going to look like so they can be thinking about how they might test it. And then our designers are there through implementation. They help accept our stories to make sure that they match up with what the intended interaction was. And the QA team also helps with accepting that implementation, make sure it matches. Sorry, that rambled a little bit.
That's exactly what it is.
I feel like I've covered these pretty well. Implementation is obviously the engineering portion of this. So I know it feels a little bit waterfally sometimes when we're looking at this. We feel like we've been able to keep it pretty agile because, especially in discovery, we do a lot of iteration on what it is we're actually going to build. So the engineers are involved in helping define that. We're constantly cutting back down to a minimum viable product, figuring out what it is we have to do in order to get some value out of this thing, and then getting our engineers working on it. What we've been trying to do, I'll answer your question in 1 second, what we've been trying to do is identify how many things we're able to accomplish at each phase. So this is where the Kanban part really kind of comes in. Identifying what our capacity for work in progress is at each phase. We've determined that across our roles. So we know that our engineers, they work in pairs. So our engineers can work on no more than one track, as we call them, per pair. So if we've got 2 pairs, we can have 2 tracks. Sometimes we focus them and we double up into 1 track, but really no more than one kind of feature thing at a time. Our designers can do usually 2 medium-sized projects in discovery at once. One large to extra large, or they can do, a large and small, something like that. User researchers, we found that they can do up to 2. So our user researchers are usually split across 2 spheres, so they can do about 1 thing per sphere or 2 things for the same sphere, in terms of doing all the testing that goes along with the discovery phase. So moving into that way, I think there were a couple questions.
Yeah, you almost answered it a bit. One part is like when we actually do the planning. I mean, because I think some of us have a pretty defined definition of what a backlog is.
Yeah,
So
great
it could
question.
be prioritizing, could be size already, but you do the sizing in discovery, but then you move directly to implementation, or is the planning part of the discovery?
Yeah, right kind of in the intertwined part of that, or overlapping part, we do what we call an Inception meeting. So before anything is able to move from discovery into implementation, we have to sit down with the designer, the product manager, and at least the lead engineer on the project to sit down, go through every single mock in detail, and write out all the stories. So that's our big planning phase. Usually takes a couple of hours to lay that down, and then we bring in everybody and we estimate those. We do use story points, and we do know our velocity per sphere. So we can usually, after the Inception meeting, get a sense of, okay, if we are, based on our velocity, we're going to be ready to start this at the beginning of next week. If we do that, and we know what our velocity is going to be, we should be able to release 3rd week of March, basically, something like that.
So when you break this down into stories at that phase, do you have something like a technical backlog where you have all your stories and the teams are pulling over there?
Yeah, that's where we build the pivotal tracker backlog, basically. So we write the stories directly into tracker, we estimate them right there, and we usually tag them with whatever track that's going to be called, and we go from there. And then obviously they start out in the icebox, and then the product manager will move them over. Product manager usually will denote with like a release tag what has to be in that first release, and then anything that's going to come after that, so we can give the business a sense of when we're going to see that feature live.
So,
Are your spheres, these teams dedicated? Or shared?
How do you mean?
If I understood the teams.
It sounds like they share, because she's mentioned a couple of
We
people
share.
to bounce back.
I was going to talk to that one a little bit. So basically, we have a lead engineer, we have a product manager, and a lead designer who are pretty much anchors for that sphere. They do not move from that sphere for at least 6 months, maybe even longer. Then we have other engineers that will move and shift depending on where the priorities of the business are. So the cool thing about that is people get to get their hands on a lot of different code. And we do pair programming, so
thought they could get this much done on this other sphere, but in reality it wasn't actually happening. So we went to 100% allocation for the engineers.
When you move people around, typically your velocity goes down because the team is not used to work together. Did you track that over time? Did you make an argument maybe with management to have fewer people that are dedicated teams?
That's just the one that's
It's
facing.
6 months. 6 months is fairly adequate.
But that's only for the lead engineer, and we usually have about 4 engineers per team. So the other 3 are eligible to be moved around. Beth's face is
Yeah, it does affect velocity, absolutely. So I think one of the most important things you can do to try and increase velocity is do retrospectives regularly. Like we're pretty much on top of them, especially when a team first starts. Within the first couple of weeks we have one, and we try to make it fun and so that people are a little more comfortable with each other. And over time, we just keep on trying to. And that's I found has been one of the best ways to increase velocity is just to keep on with that open and honest communication and getting things out on the table.
We also do, we make resource recommendations. So every couple of weeks we sit down with our head of product, our head of QA, head of engineering, and we figure out where the constraints are, or based on the new priorities, what we might need to do. And they really do listen to us and saying, you know what, this team just got together. If we move things around, it's really going to be, a hit in productivity. So unless there's, a huge change in company strategy or something, they usually kind of default to whatever we suggest in terms of no, it would not be detrimental to change this team around, or don't touch this one. Dave.
I wanted to understand what's going on. You said you have an Inception meeting when I guess some block of work goes into implementation. And I guess that's multiple stories.
Yeah.
And that can run so that block of the engineering team will be working on that block of stories for how long before it pops out the other end?
Depends on the size of the feature or the product. Some of them can be 3 to 4 months worth of work. Some of them can be 2 weeks worth of work. Depends on obviously those inceptions. We don't honestly have inceptions for the little tiny ones. We usually know we could do that in a normal sprint planning meeting. We preserve the inceptions for this bigger projects that we're currently building a vendor management system. So we have kind of vendor scorecards of how to track who our best performing vendors are, which ones we have quality problems with, that kind of thing. That's a standalone app that's going to integrate into our e-com system. That got a big inception.
And is that time somehow divided up internally, or is it structured, or is it Kanban inside that 3 or 4 months if it's a big piece? Do you break that up, or how do you break that up?
We break it into individual stories. In terms of story points, we use Fibonacci 1 through 8. So we try not to get up to any 8s. Sometimes we'll put an 8 mostly as a placeholder, and we break those down. But usually in the inceptions, it's kind of exhaustive in that we get to the 1 to 3 point level of stories. We literally will go through each mock and say, okay, you write a note here. You can view the notes and paginate it. You can edit your note. You can we write stories to that level.
So how do those get delivered then? Is it delivered in a continuous Kanban-ish fashion, or is there some big bang at the end of the 3 or 4 months if it's a big project where everyone sees the results? How does that happen?
For this particular project, the product manager is basically the team got to the point where they had it basically up and running. They had the first feature done of that whole system, and so they sent out the link and we started testing, and now they check in every day and they see the progress, and they take that and they started testing it with our users. In this case, our internal employees. So we've taken that, our product manager was in LA yesterday and the day before to test this new system with the users who will be using it. So she got a bunch of feedback. She's come back. She's working with the designer, and they're tweaking some of those stories that are coming down the line. So it's not hidden from anybody. It's usually, and the product manager actually can send something out to all the stakeholders, including our executives, saying, follow this link. Here's your login information, so you can play around with it. This is basically how far we've gotten. So it's very transparent within the organization for anybody who wants to take the time to know what's going
and it's potentially useful because you're the eventual users of the system are looking at it now as far as it's completed. So
Yeah, and this is one of the biggest benefits of this, because before we really weren't testing any of those things early enough on. So now the stakeholders are so much happier. The house is not on fire because they know it's happening earlier on, and they get to, they have some input into it. Sorry, Beth, you need to start answering. I feel like I'm speaking for both of us here. Ralph?
Kind of was you ever like a defined release cadence where it's 3 months, or is it more like a train and projects can run longer, but then you release them?
It's a train, and if you miss the train, you have to wait till the next train. That's pretty much how we are. We were trying to hold the train up, and that was causing huge train crashes. So, yes, we have a train approach. There has to be a really, really, really good reason for us to hold up the train. I mean, seriously good reason, where we have like executives and board members saying, hold that train.
Last week we had to hold the train.
We did.
I think. But it wasn't because of us, it was because of miscommunication with our marketing department. So they thought that something was going to go live on Thursday morning, and our train leaves Wednesday morning. So we had to hold the train until Thursday morning, because that's what they...
So are you saying you have weekly installs on production? Okay. And that because that's actually would be the answer to my question for a non-internal system, I guess. That potentially, if someone is working on a feature for 3 or 4 months, then potentially parts of that feature could be delivered every week during the 3 or 4 months if it's useful.
And we have done things where we release something, where we feature block it to just get it out there, maybe collect data or do something to just make sure it's stable, and then we'll have the mailing. So
At this point, we've got enough users and enough traffic on the site that it's getting harder to do incremental releases of new features, because there's a little bit less, I'd say a little bit less forgiveness, I guess, by our users. They're getting to the point that they expect it to be robust and fully functional and things, so there's a little less wiggle room than there used to be, I think.
Is there any one individual who's responsible for the overall system architecture? Or how much leeway do developers have to participate in really designing the software?
that's a really good question. We have like a principal engineer who's pretty much overseeing a lot of this stuff, but I would say it's a very collaborative environment, and people are always giving their feedback, always being involved in a lot of these decisions. We had a project where we were changing, like, this is just a smaller example, where we were changing our search, and we decided to go with another product, and we involved ops, and we had product managers involved talking about like what they were expecting, and some lead engineers also giving their feedback and advice, or based on things that they've used before and things like that. So it is a very collaborative effort. I wouldn't say any decisions are made in a box. There's certainly, we have a really bright team, so it's important that we use everybody we have.
Is that affected by how people move around though? Are there certain people that work really well together and right one?
We do see a little bit of that, like even just like personality differences. But I would say for the most part, it's not. People are pretty collaborative. I mean, they really are trying to be inclusive, and we do have a range of like senior engineers and junior engineers, and it's kind of nice to see. It's sort of like the, for lack of a better analogy, it's sort of like the big brother who plays with his kid brother out in the streets with some other kids in the neighborhood of all ages. I mean, it is very.
It's the culture that really facilitates that.
And I think for a lot of the senior engineers, it's good experience for them, and like kind of coaching and teaching somebody else, and especially somebody who's really eager to learn, is like, feed me more, give me more information. So I think it's a nice culture to be in, and it's kind of cool to see, especially the pairs. They take it very seriously. They call themselves married couples, and they go to the bathrooms together. They go to lunch together. They're always like, it's something. I mean, it's very, very sweet. It's like we walk together.
we've also, I think one reason for that is because, you know, in a lot of organizations, when contractors come in, they're kind of second-class citizens in a lot of ways. We started with contractors. So our contractors are full members of the team, and in most cases, they know the system far better than our employees know the system because they've been around. They're the only piece of longevity in our technology organization at this point. So some of them had just kind of had their 2-year anniversary on the project, which in ModCloth life is like 10 years. So I think that has started us out on the right foot.
I don't mean to interrupt, but just in the interest of the presentation and the folks, do we want to?
We've got, yeah, we can fly.
I just want to know, raise your hands, do we want to, finish off and then do a Q&A? I mean, do people want to share their experiences that are here? And I know there's one person I would like to, that's from Lean, a Lean organization. All right, I'm just giving an option, I'm opening it up to the format. So we'll finish up.
Well, let's not rush these guys.
Okay, all right, cool.
Yeah.
Just trying to gauge how folks are doing.
So I
Take your time.
I'm going to follow up to this question regarding architecture. For some of the major features that you guys have, even though you have a collaborative team, do you still require that your principal engineer sign off on something like search because you don't want to take chances?
I would say it's very important that he's bought into it. I would say if he's like, no, we're not doing it, we're not doing it. Unless the entire team pretty much is like, so that might happen. But I would say for the most part, people respect him too. And if he has a valid reason for not doing it, they want to hear it. So.
When you were discovery phase, what kind of metrics do you drive that discovery?
What kind of metrics
Do
drive?
you use to drive that discovery?
Well, the metrics are really defined in the opportunity assessment phase, so it's different for each project. What we do in opportunity assessment is try and figure out what it is we're solving for. So in the vendor management thing I was talking about, it's that we want to provide higher quality close. So we're trying to meet that metric. Another metric that, and of course that's not a metric, that's just sort of a strategy. The other strategy that we're really going to is building better systems for our employees, kind of paying back into the infrastructure of our teams and our company. I honestly can't tell you exactly what the metrics are for that one. But what we're trying to move towards, and it's probably because this is one of the first projects to go through this thing, where I anticipate that we will get is that we will say the metric for the goal that we're trying to reach with vendor management is that at any point in time we want any of our designer relations team to be able to go in and find a vendor score, and by the end of this year we want to have all of our vendors above X number, or we want to stop relations with the vendors that are below this percentile or the bottom X percent, whatever those things may be. I think those are the metrics that we're trying to move towards.
So that's how you determine business value.
Yes, I think. I mean, would you agree?
Yeah, I mean, if you're talking about like how do we decide when something's ready to move into implementation, is that what you mean? Or are you talking
No,
about
you actually just answered it. You define that, in this case, a vendor that's not meeting a certain parameter is basically that's under your business value. Business value is that certain vendors are meeting a certain parameter, we want to keep them, and that's how you focus on delivery mechanism.
Yeah, that's absolutely right.
So, thanks.
So where do we go from here? We're still very new at implementing Scrumban, so we need to really enforce the ideal ratio for each phase. We know what it is now. We've been able to finally determine what that work in progress limit is for each of those phases, but we're not actively enforcing it. We are letting there be a pile up between design, or between discovery and implementation. One of the reasons for that is that we have pretty big resource constraints. We have a big product management team, we have a big design team, we have a smaller engineering team who are not really proportionate at this point.
I've seen you advertise recently.
We are hiring, by the way. Yes, we're hiring for QA, for Agile project leads, for engineers, and business data analysts. So, if you know anyone, or you are someone, terms of the ideal ratio, part of that's going to come as our team size stabilizes. Another thing is that we need to use velocity through ratios to determine our resources. We just got to a point on one of our teams where we have such a buildup that it really doesn't make sense to continue having a designer on the team because we've built it to the point where we've got about 2 months worth of work waiting for the engineers, and they're not yet going to be able to start it for a while. So we need to be able to identify that sooner so that we can reallocate that designer into a project where she can add more value sooner. So we're identifying it that's almost after the fact. And the last thing where we really go, well not the last, but the last one I'll highlight is eliminating the waste that we have identified. We've got a lot of that waiting time. We've got a lot of buildup happening. We know about a lot of it. I know there's a ton that we don't know. But at this point, we're not making a lot of steps to eliminate that yet. So we're still in the kind of identification phase. And then from here, I think we're going to go into fixing it, making that process harder.
I'm just going to talk a little bit about some of the lessons we learned, and I'll try to keep this brief because I want to hear from you guys as well, sort of your experiences. One of the things that are certainly working together has been a challenge. Whenever you have a group of people with different motives and different sort of goals, it's important to get everybody on the same page. So that was certainly something I'll be talking a little bit more about. The next part is delivering the best product. Like, what is the best product? How do we know we've got the best product? And also figuring out how to communicate that to everybody else that's involved in this process. And then, of course, adoption of just kind of our flavor of Agile. So, working together. Well, as I mentioned, we do a lot of fist bumps, but there's a cross-functional team. So we have people who they're coming from a different background. Some of them have never even worked in an Agile way, and it's important that these teams are coming together and collaborating. And so we took some of the aspects of Scrum, which are the daily stand-ups, the sort of prescribed meetings, the retrospectives, things like that. We took the whole the concept from Kanban of like transparency of workflow. We decided let's take the best of those and put them together. It's also helped a lot with teams in the business units, so people who are in marketing, people who are in our merchandising teams, to help them feel included in this process. Everybody's welcome to come to any of our Inception meetings. They're welcome to come to our stand-ups to find out where things are. They can look at our boards, our whiteboards, and see where something is. And we try to be as available as much as we can for those teams so that they feel a part of it and they're included in this process. The next bit is around prediction takes time. It's hard to figure out what your velocity is. We literally started this in November, and probably about a couple weeks ago really got a good idea of how much engineers can work on, how many points they can actually do in a week. For designers, like trying to understand t-shirt size projects, like a small project. Well, what exactly is a small project? And how many designers does it take to get that moving? Or is adding more designers actually helping, or is it making it worse? And so a lot of what we've been doing is trial and error and then reflecting on it. I think it's a really important thing to keep remembering is try something but reflect on it. The next piece, as I said, time for reflection. I think it's super important that you take that time to do it. As we mentioned, we do retrospectives. We try to do them early on, especially when the team is first forming. But we also, after we reflect, we have action items. So everybody, the team is accountable to making this a better process. It's not just one person. It's not me. It's not Ashely. It's the team. And so the team is going to take the responsibility for it. And they're excited to take the responsibility for it because, hey, this is my new marriage and I'm going to make it work. So I think the most important part of that is make sure you have action items out of it and have the team committed to those action items. And again, you can't change overnight. It took us some time. We had to go through this education process, not only with our teams within the product and technology organizations, but also with the stakeholders, the different business units, product was another huge lesson for us. Understanding the true MVP, and I say true MVP because I feel like people think minimum viable product, like does that mean we're just going to slap something up on a website? What if I don't like it? What if it doesn't meet my user's needs? What we're saying here, a minimum viable product is something that the product owners are happy with, the stakeholders are happy with. It's something that has gone through user testing, but we're also saying let's keep it simple. Let's not try and solve problems for everything. Let's try to solve the problem that we have and not try to anticipate what might be coming down the road, but actually taking care of what we need to take care of. So making sure that we're building something that's usable. I think those are all really important things that we've learned through these different processes. And then time boxing, I think, especially with our designers, that was something that they found they needed more of. But then also we think about with their engineers, we have velocity points, and we talk about what we can get done in a week. We talk about, is this feasible? Is this realistic? Can we meet these deadlines? And that's something we took from Scrum. Certainly putting a little more restrictions around what we're doing. So then adoption, that was a really key part. I mean, we had to go talk to our stakeholders. We had to listen to their needs. We had to understand where they were coming from and then try to help them understand how, if we're following these practices, they're going to feel more involved, or they're going to feel that they're being listened to. With the rest of the team even, we had to get some of the people who are kind of like, oh, Agile. I've worked in Agile before, and it hasn't been great. And say, well, this is going to be different because we're going to be listening to your feedback, and we're going to be making changes. But again, it's kind of getting out there and explaining how this is going to be a good solution because we're all committed to working on it. And let's just give it a try. The next part was buy-in, and that is really hard, especially with executives. And I think for us, we tried a few different things. Again, we listened to what their needs were. We tried to show how our practices could help those needs. A lot of times we couldn't get them to just buy into it right away. So maybe meet somewhere in the middle. Maybe you say, all right, well, we're going to try this for the first 2 weeks. Let's talk about how it's going, and let's make adjustments based on that. So maybe not trying to do everything all at once, but trying to do one thing at a time. Again, getting them to buy and see, was that beneficial? We had this even with things like retrospectives. One of the first things that came up when we tried to plan a retrospective is, it's not really a good use of my time. We work fine together. We got the job done, right? And it's like, well, let's just give it a try. Let me know how you like it. And now we have people who are literally like, what is our next retrospective? Didn't we just have one? Like, we haven't had one in like a couple weeks now. Are we going to have one? And they really enjoy it because it's a safe place for them to give their feedback and to talk about how they're going to commit together as a team to get better. The next piece, communication, and this is something that we found. Although we like Kanban and we like the transparency of Kanban, and it's one way of communicating, it's visual, Scrum really helped us a lot with these prescribed check-ins. So again, like the stand-ups, the daily stand-ups, coming together as a team. And then also just keeping it open so anybody can come into these meetings, everybody's welcome, and doing a good job of keeping people updated. We all kind of take a role as a team to try and help communicate whatever we need to communicate. So, for example, if design has a really cool thing they want to show engineering almost always is excited to sit down, take a look at what's going on. So, just really trying to foster that communication. We try to sit together. If we have people who are remote pairing, because we do remote pairing, we really try to keep them online the entire day. We have sometimes people will use like a microphone at their desk and a video camera, or sometimes they'll have their headsets on, but they're literally talking the entire day with a few like bathroom breaks and things like that. And then the final part, celebrate the small victories, take it one step at a time, don't rush into everything. I think it's really important to get something right and then move on, and definitely celebrate those victories. I think it's important for the team to recognize when they've done something well, when they've reached a milestone. Before you know it, you're going to have a lot of milestones behind you. It's just like taking one step at a time, but I think it's super important. Our recommendations. also we're reaching out to these people at the same time. And then whenever there's unrealistic demands on time, this is really helpful because we can look at our velocity and say, this is just not realistic. I mean, look, like we can only do 15 points in a week, and this is going to be like 100 points. There's no way we're going to get that done in like a month. And again, cross-functional teams, we found the kind of combination of Kanban and Scrum a really nice marriage to include everybody in the team so they understand where things are at. So thank you guys. If you have any questions, we're happy to answer them, but I'd also like to hear from you guys. So.
Is anyone, a raise of hands on who's actually implemented Kanban and is using Kanban? Can I see a raise of hands? And what about Scrum? Any mix?
Does anybody have any of their own experiences?
Does anyone want to stand up and share an experience or a question? General question?
I have a question, and this maybe for Sam or you guys. Based on these presentations, what I understood of Kanban was you were borrowing a lot from Scrum, but instead of having a box sprint, you're saying we have a queue where we just pull things out of the queue, and some of your metrics are there, like you have the and the weights instead of sprint velocity and things like that. But I'm still not sure what the takeaway is. Like, what do I gain by moving from Scrum to Kanban? And if I were to try and sell this to my management team, how do I do that? Because it seems like it's not very different. At least, this is the first where I'm hearing about it significantly. Like, how do you sell this? Or is it not really that different?
Wait a minute, do you want to sell it?
I'm asking, like, when I walk out of this room, what did I learn?
Scrum's working for you, you Scrum, waterfall, waterfall,
What product do you do? We have an internal application.
I like Kanban, but it doesn't have time limits to it. That's the thing that goes me at Kanban. I like it for introduction support, I like it for discovery phase. That made absolute sense. It didn't make sense, it doesn't make sense when you're moving a product to production.
And our engineers have not bought into it as much as our designers and researchers and analysts have. They really like that board, and they really like to know how many things they can have in progress at once.
The thing with Scrum is it facilitates, go back to the Pavlovian thing, but it facilitates development teams understanding exactly what they can do in a certain time frame and driving velocity around that and deriving it based on the definition done. And what you do, once you do that and you keep the team together, you enable the predictability. As you're doing, as you're splitting up teams, I mean companies that do that, and you lose that predictability. Once you get in that cycle, the teams really get comfortable with that and they can deliver. Kanban doesn't allow that.
Well, I have to protest.
Please protest.
Because it's actually, it's a very common belief that if you cannot have iterations in Kanban, I've done more Kanban with iterations than without it, and I've been doing it for a few years.
I support that in the sense of the metaphor of the train week, you know you've got a weekly update process, and you put a lot of energy into that process, and you know that, for us, our thing is Wednesday evening.
localization specialist. So you visualize your workflow, and all you do is you put a limit, and it's an arbitrary number when you start, a limit on each of those steps in your workflow. And you adjust them by measuring your cycle time. Those are the three things. And a lot of the benefits of Kanban is that come from the fact that the optimization happens naturally. You don't meet anybody over the head and say, do this, do that. We need to have a big negotiation on what we think you can get done in 2 weeks. And the marketing department says, we're busy doing marketing. We don't have time to meet every 2 weeks with your development department for this big process. So that's kind of better.
So that's actually a big overview, because in Scrum and Agile, everything you do is done in power. The end product, you look at the end product, you parallelize that with everything. Development, documentation, marketing, discovery happens in power. So it is a bit more fixed, but it's healthy when you get a team, and it's really exciting to see a team start understanding all this process flows and what you need to do to have a value point.
At the end of being logically equivalent, once you cross into that rhythm, whichever one you choose, the end of being logically equivalent, because the thing that you're trying to trace there is how do the estimation approximately, because you want to work in the time box way, and how we can hit my time box. And this way we've got, we're just kind of struggling about that a little bit. It's a bit there. Oh, an average thing.
No, I totally get that. I would actually much be far more comfortable doing Canva. But the thing is, when I'm delivering for a company, you know the stresses of a company, so I can make the team comfortable around the 40-hour week, with their focus factor, get X amount of work done, and I'm going to protect that team into the hills, and say, you're not going to do any more than that. This is what we're going to do for predictability. You're going to be comfortable. It's going to be, you're going to feel good about your work. I can start, after a few months, I can actually start putting dollars on it to get that predictability, and I can start saying, Radical Fusion, I can start saying to my customer, this is going to cost you $100,000. This is going to cost you X amount. I don't believe at this moment that you can do that.
No, what about the stress factor though, where you have the death march at the end of every sprint?
There isn't stress.
If it's in
If
the
you're
right,
good at protecting your team, and you're good at leveling them, remember everything's done in parallel. You're starting QA first, in fact, before you develop it, because you're writing the script. You're writing the QA, you're writing high-level test cases, and everything starts from there. If you're doing pair programming, you're also doing pair testing. And that's very important, because you'll see the mini waterfall. Everyone's heard of mini waterfall. We do a story, then we do QA, and then we on that door. No, you don't do it that way. We do QA and development together. Test it all in one. Everything is done in parallel. Product owner starts writing documentation for training and delivering the feature. It all happens at the same time. It is very hard. It sounds easy, but it's very hard to educate companies to do that. Once you get it going, once the team start understanding that, they love it. They really do love it.
What I really find interesting is all these conversations that revolve around Scrum and around Kanban is the lack of the bigger picture. To me, is the business. It's like you put a bunch of engineers and QA people, they'll figure it out. They will deliver a great product if they're if they're empowered. But what's interesting is nobody's talking about what I think is very similar, and which is really the biggest problem business has. When I say business, I'm talking the management stakeholders, the executives, and unfortunately the product owners. Because they all have to get educated. To me, what Kanban and Scrum do is the most important thing. Of course, those folks to make the trade-offs. And that's all I'm hearing is, oh, with Kanban, we're limiting work in progress. What does that mean? We're telling management, giving you a trade-off. We can't take all, you can't have it all. Scrum does the same thing.
You actually have
so it's a limit?
It's a problem, because we all talk at the team level.
Right.
Take
it up a notch.
I know you're at relay level. You've got to assign the project leads to actually take responsibility. Their goals need to be assigned to dealing with supporting the Scrum.
But it's the frameworks. We're talking about two frameworks.
Where we get again in lead is that Scrum is very team-centric. Lead is the big picture.
See,
it's about optimizing.
Yeah, through the stuff that happens before it ever gets down to the team. The themes. Give me themes that you want. Give me the strategic vision. And then we'll continue to add ethics. It does work. And it's
I think there are legal presentation now.
But I think that between Scrum and Kanban, they're just frameworks. What I think lacks the success of either framework in an organization is the lack of culture, of understanding what trade-offs is, optimization, predictability. It's the business world doesn't want to step back and embrace something they're not used to. They're used to.
Does the business world want continuous improvement?
Exactly.
Because
The biggest question
that's
is.
a core tenet of Lean, which is.
Okay.
I'm just saying that it's fun to bring that up.
And we hear okay, fair enough. But we hear
The
people.
reality is at the team level, businesses can accept this, but when it comes to their own responsibility, whoa, no, I don't need to do this.
Because they think Agile and Scrum are the same things. We're Or change.
Hey, one more question, please.
Can I steer us away from the religious ball because it's not going to help us get our lean process?
I'm just trying to answer.
Oh, I think we're roughly the same place. You have worked in both. I'm more happy with lean for my team. I've worked in other teams where I'm more happy with traditional Agile because they all know it and can do it. My hope for today was to get some very specific understandings of lean that help me push my process forward a little bit more. So if anybody here's got experience of applying lean, Scrumban, pretty much described by the Coriolanus work rather than any other area for me, has anybody mastered the distributed team yet?
How do you define that?
Or make it work? Just the whiteboard is very important.
We can take a picture of our whiteboard and email it every day.
It's difficult by using Skype and whiteboard Skype.
No, I mean, I've done it entirely with a virtual tool. It would no work.
Which virtual tool?
Actually, I did Agile and then we moved to Greenhawk, actually, it was a Jira.
What was the one?
Agile.
Agile Zen.
Zen.
So, I'll make the plug. I'll make the plug for Greenhopper as well. Obviously, I think that the board is definitely the way we want to start because I think that going back to your trade-offs thing, the great thing about the board, the physical board, is that it's visibility, right? The team knows that if it's on the board, everybody up above can see what I'm working on, right? Transparency. Executives can go down to the board and go, okay, well, if it's not on there, then I'm not going to get done. So having that is key. For a distributed team, if the physical board doesn't work with video conferencing and all that other stuff, a tool can come in, right? And obviously, there's a ton of vendors that make tools.
We've got Liquid on the one hand, sorry, Liquid, we're using Cover Tool Tracker like everybody else is for that kind of